All right, hello everyone. I want to welcome you to today's presentation about how 5G will not only change the way that we bank, it's going to change the way that we transact every single day. My name is Greg Wilford. I'm the Chief Mobility and Marketing Officer at AP Technology. We create total payment solutions for most of the major banks, government organizations, and businesses of all sizes. This year, we'll process more than $80 billion for our customers, and it's an exciting space. So what is 5G anyway? Well, do you remember when we used to use our phones just for communicating via voice? That's all the phone did. It was an analog signal, and we called it 1G. It was the first generation of cell phone technology. But then 2G arrived, and with it came text messaging, and to a small degree, we could even do some multimedia messaging. Some of you may remember ringtones as an example. And shortly thereafter, 3G arrived. Now that was the cool stuff. It's the smartphone technology that we're used to today. We were able to browse the web, and we could download the things that were near and dear to our hearts. It was a better experience, certainly faster, but it wasn't anywhere near as fast as 4G technology, which took 3G and broadened the pipe to allow much more information through to your mobile devices. And that means we could enjoy more music, more movies, more of the things that were important to us. And although that was fast, 4G is nowhere near as fast as what 5G is supposed to be. And so today we're going to talk about how it's going to change our lives, mostly from the perspective of how we bank and how we transact, we purchase things every day. And so we've assembled a who's who, some of the brightest minds in the mobile space. And I'm going to introduce each of our panelists to you. At the end of the session, you can actually click on their pictures if you'd like to schedule a private session with any of us. We'll try to get back to you within the next few days. But in the meantime, after I ask each panelist their initial question, we'll go to the next panelist and so forth. And then we're going to open it up into a fireside chat and have a really nice discussion about 5G technologies. So the first panelist I want to introduce you to is probably no stranger to anyone who's been in the mobile space. Mike Dano has been involved in mobile since even before 2000. And you've probably read his commentaries. He's had his ear to the ground on mobile payments and also the mobile phones themselves forever. And so, Mike, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I started to talk a little bit about 5G and what it is, but the folks that are tuning in today are going to hear a couple terms. One of them is speed. The other one is more curious. It's called latency. And not a lot of people know what that is, but maybe you could not only define latency, but let us know, are we going to be better off with latency with regard to 5G than we were with 4G?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that everyone is focused on speeds, and 5G is certainly faster when you download stuff, and so that's definitely going to happen. But I think the more interesting part of it is latency, and so latency is just the time that it takes from when you click a button to when something happens. So if you were to go to lightreading.com, which is the website that I currently write for, the latency is the time when you click on the button and then the page loads. So it's not download is the size of the file, but latency is the delay between when you want something and when the request goes out to the internet and then it's sent back to you. That's latency. And then there's a lot of factors that go into that, but in 5G, there is a way to make that way, way faster.
That's good. And, that will impact not only transactions, but some of the folks that are tuning in today may have heard that 5G may be used for remote operations in the medical field, as an example. And therefore, Mike, am I correct? Latency, the speed with which something reacts is going to be just incredibly important, not only when you're transacting, but also to a number of other fields as well, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, latency will affect, a wide range of applications on the internet. And the possibility of remote surgery is one that people have talked about for sure. I think I've heard other people say that, no one wants to be the first person to have a remote surgery. And I think that's a fair, that's a fair thing. So I think that may be a little bit further out in terms of what we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot of different applications that will benefit from a reduction in latency. And I mean, you can just imagine that, when you request information on the internet, whatever that might be, whether it's a video or a virtual reality stream or just a website, having it returned to you quickly or almost instantaneously is, that can change a lot.
Thanks a bunch, Mike. And, I inadvertently forgot to tell everybody listening that not only did your career start, with mobile, but you've been involved with several great publications. One of them I'm very familiar with, which was RCR Wireless. And then that blossomed into Fierce Markets. Fierce Wireless was a part of that. And an early company I was involved with was actually one of the Fierce 15, as they called it way back when. And so light reading is something that I hope our listeners will give a chance, and it's got some great insights from you, Mike. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of great insights, our next panelist is Brian Ducharme. He's the Vice President, Global Head of Payments and Product Management for Transaction Network Services. Hi, Brian.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Greg. I'm Mike. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yep, and you're going to provide some wonderful perspectives, to the mobile space. And for those who have just tuned in, not only were you involved with the Debit Network Alliance, you've been involved with a very large company called First Data in their product and innovation field. And all in all, you've been in the mobile payments and wireless space for more than 20 years. So we're looking forward to hearing everything you have to tell us about what to expect in the future of mobile payments, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's been a journey. I sort of stumbled on payments while I was working in wireless as we were rolling out pay-as-you-go mobile in the U.S. in the late 90s. And, I've been on the how to make payments easier, faster, and safer for
a long time.
Since the time I did not have gray hair or need bifocals.
Well, you dovetailed right into something I wanted to talk with you about, and that is, the application of 5G technology and how relevant is it to the mobile devices we use today? Now, through your career and, even within the last couple of years, we've started to transact with greater regularity on our mobile devices. But with 5G, does this make the value proposition for everybody listening as consumers? Does this make it more cool? Is 5G make mobile devices a better device to transact with?
I think the short answer is yes, it will. Does it now? It's a work in progress. And I think, to Mike's point, this is really about a journey here, and that first we had, faster networks and slower devices. Then devices got smarter, and devices stayed still. And so we're in this constant marathon of network versus device. And that's where we are. So my thinking here is that 5G is going to is finally going to match the power of the handheld computer, because ultimately, iPhone and Android and others have reached the point where we're carrying around a supercomputer in the palm of our hand.
It's true.
And one of the things that will happen is that we're finally going to get parity between the device and the network that can carry that. TNS's founding is really based on removing latency and unpredictability out of the payments ecosystem. Back in the the early 90s, when POS terminals needed to send a message up over a copper dial line to get a transaction to work on these new things called point of sale devices, terminals, we figured out how to do that and make sure that the packet of information that started out at the store ended up at the decision point, which was at the bank for a yes or no answer. So I think 5G will definitely help us figure that out. I would sort of expand the thinking beyond just payments and go with commerce, because to the point about medical applications, logistics, and even push payments. When you think about what 5G can do to it can do for rural markets or developing countries, developing markets, close the gap on the buyer-seller experience, make it more predictable, and also drive out fraud from those transactions. So that's sort of where we see the big win once devices and networks sort of catch up and reach parity.
Great, Brian, and you hit a great point, which is security, right? As long as we're going to be transacting, as long as we're going to be banking with these devices, they better be secure. So we'll get into that a little bit, but thanks again for your insights. We'll touch on that a lot more. And with that, I want to introduce our third panelist, and this is someone who I've respected for a number of years. He's the research director, financial services for Insider Intelligence. And Dan Van Dyke is someone who you've probably read or heard from on a variety of different news outlets. He's been featured, his reports and business intelligence has been featured on Fox Business News, Fortune, Forbes, even CBS News. So Dan, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about all the wonderful things that 5G can do, right? And it's easy to get caught up in the hype, which is why it's wonderful to have an analyst on our panel to keep us grounded, because there is a lot of hype. And what I'd like to ask you as your first question, Dan, is 5G real? What's your analyst on the potential of 5G with regard to banking? Is it real, and is it something that we as consumers can look forward to?
It reminds me of a joke. Have you heard the one about the world's greatest economist?
Tell me.
He predicted 8 out of the last 3 recessions. And so as an analyst, the trap that we try to avoid is with every technology that's coming to the market, the temptation is to hype it up as the next big thing. And so we tried to break it down in 3 different ways. One is time horizons. Are we talking 3 years? Are we talking 5 years? Are we talking 10 years? 2 is, market supply. And then 3 is consumer adoption. And I think when you account for those 3 things, what really excites me about the technology in the short term harkens back to a point that Mike brought up, which is really latency. And, I'm obviously not blowing minds when I say 5G is fast. Of course it's fast. But the impact, I think, is powerful and understated of that difference in milliseconds, whether it's shaving off millions of declines transactions, whether it's, presenting millions of ad impressions. So this can bucket up to billions of dollars. But from a more powerful perspective, thinking about the consumer experience, I think we've all wrestled with the Zoom fatigue example of everybody trying to speak at once. And that 5 or 0.5 millisecond delay can mean all the difference when it comes to the rapport of an interaction. And the same holds true when it comes to banking and payments. If you can lessen the space between what you put in and what you receive back, that feedback loop becomes so much more powerful and stable. So that's what's exciting to me in the short term is latency.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, and for everyone that's tuned in today, I think speed is something that's a sexy topic, right? So what does that mean? And one of the, I think, cool examples that I think might resonate well with our audience is that if you're in a 3G world and you wanted to download a high definition movie, it would take you 6 or 7 hours, right? And, 4G came around, the pipe was a little bit bigger, allowing more throughput. And, that whittled down the time it would take to download the same movie to, probably 6 or 7 minutes. And boom, here comes 5G. Now, the prognostications are all over the chart, but by a lot of smart folks out there talking about what it could be, it would take you roughly 5 to 6 seconds to download that same movie that took you 6 to 7 hours in 3G. That's fast, right? And I think it just bodes really well for all the great things that we're going to start seeing on our mobile phones, some of which we don't even know will make their appearance until the technology is actually introduced with with any regularity and widespread use. So that'll be fun. Okay, so there are several things regarding 5G that go hand in hand. I'm going to throw this out to the group because along with 5G, you're going to hear a lot about augmented reality and virtual reality, right? And so with 5G, faster times, more throughput, does this even the playing field for smaller businesses and companies that want to enter into commerce? Does it allow them to compete against the big boys? Brian, you want to tackle that first?
Yeah, so I'm sure that when we were thinking about this question a few months ago in preparation for today, we didn't imagine that small and medium businesses would be fighting a fire, a global pandemic, and certainly small businesses need bigger tools to compete in the online space. Those that have embraced omni-channel, for lack of better, are faring okay, and in some cases really well. So I think 5G helps. Augmented reality again is still focused very much on the consumer. 5G potentially has the promise to help machine to machine and business to business applications, and we can explore that a little further. But I think certainly anything that can contribute to helping small business and basically saving Main Street is an imperative. And I know all the big mobile operators are focused on making sure they help their customers. So that's a good thing from my point of view.
Yeah, right on, Brian. And when we're talking about fighting fires and basically using our mobile phones in a meaningful way, we have to make sure that our mobile phones work indoors, right, Mike? I mean, that's one of the hits on 5G is that the frequencies being used are shorter than a 4G wavelength, and therefore they're having some trouble penetrating inside of buildings. And there's some other challenges too, right? It's not all rosy, outlooks, right, Mike?
Oh yeah, I have to admit I'm a little bit of a skeptic on almost everything when it comes to technology because it's hyped in a certain way, and then when you actually start using it, you're
not disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all have experienced that. But yeah, for 5G specifically, I mean, there's a number of obstacles, of major obstacles that will need to be overcome for anyone to get any major benefit out of this technology. So I mean, the other speakers have talked about a journey. We're definitely going to be on a journey. We're just taking the first step now. It's going to be a while, I think, before anything major is comes out of 5G. But yeah, I mean, the indoor problem is just one of many. And you're right, it gets into a real sort of technical details about how 5G works, but it's all about different spectrum bands. Some spectrum bands that are currently used for 5G do actually go inside of buildings pretty well, but a lot of others don't. And so you get some benefit from 5G inside, but a big benefit of 5G just the signals can't go through buildings. And so
we'll try not to geek out too much here, Mike, but
Yeah.
I do want to talk about, the billions of dollars that all the mobile carriers are investing in this technology, and, infrastructure is a huge part of it. So, Dan, Brian, I know you both are involved in that space, and Dan, maybe I can kick it to you, and then Brian, please chip in too. Let's talk about a little bit about infrastructure. Mike just said, he's a little pessimistic maybe on 5G getting here with any regularity here in the near term. What are your takes?
Yeah, so Brian, when we were sitting in the pre-speaker room talking through logistics, mentions the fact that where he's located, 5G is enabled. So over the past few weeks, he's been experimenting with it, which sounds really fun, and I'm jealous. But at the same time, like thinking more broadly about the entire US, 3 stars have to align for you to have 5G today. 1, your wireless carrier; 2, the device; and then 3, where you're physically located. And that Venn diagram in the center, contains Brian, but not many other people. And for the short term, that's not going to change. So as we're looking ahead, what does that mean from the provider perspective? It's a very small but growing subset of consumers will have access to 5G. So what I think you'll start to see is it's an accelerant for more further looking pilots. Sexy 5-year, 10-year technologies like AR and VR start to have a tailwind effect with 5G coming into the market. But for the broad swath of consumers, it's not going to change a lot of things. So I would be short term, more bearish like Mike, and then long term a little bit bullish on the technology, as I really do think that some of the experiences enabled through this technology and the infrastructure existing, the consumers adopt, will be powerful.
Yeah, great insight. And, with the trillions of dollars that 5G is expected to help power in the different economies, there's a lot of different companies that are on the forefront of this. The viewers can look at the bottom of their screen and see that Qualcomm has made some pretty big announcements with regard to what they think the impact will be. And it's not talking about millions of dollars, it's talking about trillions of dollars globally. So I think there's some wonderful insights with that. But for the folks that are interested in how it affects them, we talked about a little bit about whether the technology will work indoors. Let's pretend for a second, Mike, that it does, okay? Because banking and transactions will depend on it, right? So there are so many different aspects of transactions that we need to look at. Not only where the 5G, will it drain our batteries? Are we going to be left, mobile phoneless in the middle of our transactions? Also, we talked a little bit about this earlier, is the security issue. Does 5G, and this is where I'd like each of you guys to jump in now, do you think 5G presents advantages with regard to security on your mobile device? Brian, you're nodding, so I'm gonna kick it back.
Well, so I think that's one of the biggest promises and opportunities that 5G can help us realize. In my time at First Data, and certainly on the Debit Network Alliance, at Star Network, we spent a significant amount of money building the next generation of fraud deterrence with our partner FeedSide. And at the end of the day, speed of situational awareness helps you manage risk. And so at a transactional level, if I can gather up certain data points and I can analyze that faster, better, easier, and I can relay that to the decision maker, in this case, a financial institution, and in some cases, I can also inform the retailer that this transaction doesn't make sense. And I'll give you a quick example in 10 seconds. But take a mule who goes to an ATM and is taking out cash using white counterfeit cards. The same person is doing it, except the ATM only sees sees a different card, white card number 1, white card number 2, white card number 3, each doing $500 withdrawals. If we can analyze that it's the same person doing it transaction after transaction after transaction, then we know that that device is being jackpotted, and we can shut it down, and we can also do a correlation of the cards that have been compromised, because you can always connect the dots. And the ability to do that in a faster, more efficient way is where we pick up on payment security. So that in of it itself will take out or avoid a lot of fraud for the inconvenience to consumers, to banks, and to merchants who have to process chargebacks. So I'm bullish about how 5G will help us bring better fraud management to the payments ecosystem on a global scale.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brian. I think geolocation and a number of other fraud prevention tools will be right in 5G's sweet spot. And Dan, I know that you've been heavily involved with use cases. Not only faster apps, more regularly updated apps, but maybe you could talk a little bit about actual use cases, both for banking and maybe even broader for consumers using in regular transactions as well.
Yeah, certainly. So I think Brian did a better job than I could of talking about the payment security angle, but really security is the most exciting use case outside of the latency one that I sort of mentioned earlier, which is something that extends to all transactions. And shifting that to banking, a really exciting security use case for 5G is that if you can host less of the application on the user's device, in other words, you're kind of streaming the services to them, then you can more regularly update from a security perspective the underlying application. And one of the major problems that this solves is right now users aren't updating their banking apps very often, and that's inhibiting security. So 5G can be a helpful use case, thinking specifically like 5-10 years out, once you reach a critical mass of consumers who have adopted 5G, that banking providers can start to build around and ultimately grow security. So that's exciting to me. Otherwise, also in that 5 to 10 year time horizon, starting to think about things like voice commerce or IoT payments starts to get exciting as well. And there's a whole lot we can touch on there. But that security one is a more grounded and powerful and exciting use case to me.
Yeah, I mean, we could have an hour conversation easy just on the impact of the Internet of Things. Maybe we could do that at a different time, Dan, but I'm with you. There are so many different uses for 5G, practical and non-practical, that will be coming our way here in, what do you think, coming months? Or is it going to be into 2022 before we start seeing, 5G? I know Brian's playing with it, but with the rest of us, not only do we need 5G, but we got to have the right devices too. Our 4G devices can't even pick up the signal.
Yeah. So the first circle in that Venn diagram I talked about, the device part, I think by 2023 at Insider Intelligence, we're predicting that there will be 1 billion 5G enabled smartphones on the market. So that circle will kind of be solved in the developed world. There's still the infrastructure problem. There's still, are you indoors? Where are you physically located? That one will take a lot more time to solve, in my perspective. So it's a mixture of those two circles and seeing the Venn diagram grow.
Excellent. Hey, Mike, back to you, because you cover this space so actively. And what are you seeing? Are you seeing that there is a real want from consumers for 5G, or are they happy wallowing in 4G experiences?
Wallowing. I mean, I like to wallow in 4G every once in a while, not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think, everyone expects the iPhone that's going to be released in the fall to have 5G. I think that'll be a big catalyst for the market. Already in China, 20% of all phones sold have 5G in it. I think the US is not far behind that. So I think in terms of actually buying 4G or 5G phones, that's going to pick up pretty quick. And everybody who's got 4G phones will have 5G phones in 2 or 3 years. I think that's definitely going to happen at a pretty quick pace. It's the network side of it that I think is going to take a little bit longer.
Okay. Brian, I needed to ask you not only about the banking side of this, but you mentioned POS terminals before. What do you see as being a point of sale experience for consumers, both in the banking world and for just in a regular retail environment?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and I think it goes to Mike's point about I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg or the double-edged sword, but in payments, in the traditional counter-based in-person experience, POS terminals work really well on 2G, 3G, and 4G technology. In fact, as a company who enables the secure data communications for millions of POS terminals in 60 countries, I can tell you that I have terminals today that are using 2G, and it works just fine. And that's because it's a very efficient payload. An authorization and an approval is very efficient. And that also is one of the barriers to get to 5G, because if it's not broken, why replace it? And in certain jurisdictions, it's the marketplace that really drives that. If you take the UK, who's putting a sunset on copper, think about it. In 2023, we're going to retire more and more copper. Those transactions will shift to wireless, and our expectation is that most of those terminals will either go to 3G or 4G, but because 5G won't be built out enough. And so we can't rely on it just in the short term. But eventually, I think 5G has the promise to make both point-of-sale terminals and the companion experience holistic. So again, if you're using 5G to close the loop for a complete transaction, if I can actually interact with a consumer at their level based on something that originated on the POSA, then that is a better experience. Just like what we're doing today with push notifications about a risky transaction. Everybody has seen those great Cap One commercials, right, with the billboards. If you take that and put it on steroids, 5G is the accelerant to help us get there. But in the short term, POSA works on 2, 3, and 4G, and he, in my Florida experiment at the moment, on board I've got 2G, 3G, and 4G, hockey pucks for Wi-Fi, and different devices, support just fine. So eventually, yes, but in the short term, it's not a showstopper for growing point of sale or the payments experience.
Okay. So guys, I am going to give you each a chance to change the world. As I feared, the time we have is not nearly enough to cover this awesome topic. But before thanking the Mobile Payments Conference, I did want to give you each a chance to change the payments landscape going forward in whichever way you choose. So Mike, I'm going to start with you. Mike Dano, you have a magic wand to do anything you want. What are you going to do?
I'm going to buy a bicycle with full suspension that has all the greatest dropper post and disc brakes. That's what I'm going to do.
And on your phone.
Oh, right. And for payments, here's what I'll do is for payments. Yeah, I mean, I thought about that question. Like the landscape is so difficult. I sold something on Craigslist yesterday, and I required cash because cash is the one thing that I know will work. I don't need an internet connection to do cash. And, you know, between, you know, sliding a card or scanning a card or doing the little chip card, it's like, or using a check or using Venmo, there's just, it's so complex right now. So I would like to eliminate the complexity, maybe have a satellite connection that runs everything and have a single point of sale terminal that that everyone will use instead of having to scan, tap, click, whatever.
Excellent.
I would like a seamless way that everyone uses the same way.
Thank you, Mike. Guys, we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask you to keep these brief. But Brian, here's your magic wand. Go.
Yeah, my magic wand would democratize banking for everyone everywhere, because fundamentally commerce is based on spend, and you can't spend what you don't have. And so saving and having access to the banking infrastructure. So especially in the U.S., where 10% of the population still are quote unquote underbanked, I would make banking available to everyone on planet Earth.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Dan Van Dyke, thanks for being with us today. Here's your magic wand. What are you going to change?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun. So I would turn forward time. I mean, one is the selfish angle of just getting past this moment in time. But two is just getting us closer to some of those cool use cases that exist further off in the future. And one relates to food, because Brian was talking about chicken and egg and double-edged sword, and all that made me hungry, which is that, you know, walking down the street, pointing my phone at a restaurant and being able to see, you know, some of the dishes that they have inside in augmented reality. That sounds awesome. I'd like that. And then two is, you know, driving down the street in my car. And since this is my fantasy, I'm going to call it a Tesla Model S. And I speak to my car and I say, I want to buy a movie ticket for a movie theater, which will hopefully exist in the future. New Chris Nolan movie. Can you buy that, and can you split it across me and my wife? That's a voice commerce experience that really excites me too. So getting away from the near term and closer to the far term, really exciting payments use cases for 5G.
Wonderful. Hey guys, I have enjoyed this 35 minutes and it screamed by. So thank you so much. It's been an honor for me to share the stage with you guys. I also want to thank our friends at the Mobile Payments Conference. They put on consistently the best mobile experience conference I've been to. So on behalf of our wonderful 5G payments team, that's Mike Dano, Brian Ducharme, and Dan Van Dyke. I'm Greg Wilford, and we wish you a terrific rest of your conference. Be safe, okay?